So when I talk to professionals about citizen science, the the first concern that people have is the quality of the data. So as a professional researcher, you're used to having quite some pride in the work that you do, and the idea that anybody off the street could come and do something better is a bit threatening and also a bit implausible. So the first response is that you're not going to really be getting any useful data. So that's really a case where you need to educate the researchers, explain to them that you're not being so naive as to just be giving their job to random members of the public, but instead you're employing a method where those members of the public can contribute in a way that is useful. So you're isolating the elements of your problem that they can contribute to, you're collecting their contributions, and then there's still the very important job to be done by the professional scientist to actually take that information and turn it into science. And actually there's additional steps involved there, in understanding your population of people that are helping you, and understanding any biases and issues around that. So it's actually, in some ways, it becomes even more of an intellectual challenge to be able to do science in that way, while taking away the more repetitive, simple tasks that actually quite often take up the majority of a researcher's time. So really, when you kind of explain that you're not just asking someone their opinion and then publishing that straight away, and that there is this testing procedure, there's quality control, and then you compare your results and calibrate your results against the professionals to make sure that it really is a high quality product, then most people are very, very keen on the idea. Another objection that sometimes, or less an objection but maybe a problem that's sometimes seen, and we've had a case of it recently in Galaxy Zoo, is that you can sometimes find hostility from the volunteers, if they think that they are being experimented on. So essentially all citizen science projects have to ask a very random subset of the public to do a task for them. And it's really the job of a citizen science project to explain why they want that task done, and to feed back what they're doing with that information to the participants, so that their time has been used well. You're maximising the kind of outreach potential of the project, and you're retaining users because you're actually keeping them informed of what's going on. However, there are times when you don't necessarily want your volunteers to know some details of what you're doing. For example, if you want to avoid certain biases, or if you want to calibrate the data, you might introduce fake data. So as well as the real images, they might occasionally be seeing a simulated image. And you don't want to tell them that they'll be seeing simulated images, because that affects their behaviour and compromises that test. So there's some kind of subtle sociological kind of issues there, and there have been times when it's come out that we've put some test images in, and people have been annoyed that we've been, or that they get the impression that we've been wasting their time on things that weren't real data, and so they couldn't have made a discovery in. But of course, any scientific measurement always has to have a calibration step. Whether you're using a microscope or the LHC at CERN, or any piece of equipment, you have to go through a stage of trying it out with things where you know the answer before you try and measure something that you don't know the answer on. And so it's the same process with the public. So that has to be explained, but there's a challenge to explaining that in a general way while not going into too much specifics, like having it flash up saying this is a simulation whenever you show them a simulation. So so that's one of the other not necessarily objections but issues that comes up.
What about concerns about exploiting volunteers rather than paying people? Is that something that ever comes up as an issue? You know, the whole internship issue that's big in the news now?
Okay, yeah. So if you're talking about small groups of people, then there is a case maybe to be made over whether you should be employing people or whether you should be using volunteers. And you could, I guess you could argue that by using volunteers you're taking taking away the need for a PhD place, but you're not having to pay those volunteers by their very nature, so you've still got that money, and there's certainly not a limited amount of science to be done. So the great thing about citizen science is it enables you to take tasks that are fairly mundane, fairly repetitive or reasonably simple, but that were taking up a lot of a professional researcher's time, and you can give those to the public to do, and that researcher can then spend much more of their time actually doing the things they're good at, which is the actual expert thinking, understanding, and compilation of all the data to produce novel science. So even with small groups, even if there's only small groups of people involved in citizen science, I don't think that's really an issue. I mean, it's an objection that can be kind of quickly pacified. When you have large numbers of people involved, then there would be no way that you could do it through, well, unless you had very, very generous funding. So with Galaxy Zoo, for example, we had around 200,000 people involved, admittedly only giving maybe an hour of their time on average, maybe not even quite that, but that's still an awful lot of money that you would need to reproduce that through a more conventional approach. Yeah. At the moment, citizen science is almost a fashion among researchers, or that's where it is happening. It's regarded as the new thing to try, and that's in some ways that's not always the citizen science isn't always the best solution in some cases. So if you don't have a research program that is easily transferable to many tasks to be done by large members of the public, then trying to squeeze it into a citizen science framework isn't really going to help. This is slightly off topic, but another thing I want to say is that when you approach scientists, or especially collaborations or even institutions, with the idea of citizen science, you often get a very positive response, and start exchanging ideas and coming up with a draft project, and then it turns out that there isn't really any science in this, and that really it's a PR exercise. So because citizen science is seen as such an effective way of doing public outreach, there's been a number of times where that's how people see it. They see it on the outreach side of their project, and so they see it as an activity to publicise their project through PR, but not one to generate science. And so we have to say, well, hold on, the whole idea of doing citizen science is generating science. We're not really willing to help you put together a project that isn't actually going to be doing anything of use, just giving the appearance of that. And so there's still a misunderstanding in some areas that citizen science is to do science, and really for its success, even for its success as a public outreach tool, it has to always have science as its focus, and it isn't something to just be used as a public outreach stunt.